The maid held up the paper and exposed the secret the millionaire tried to bury. The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble floors of the Blackwood mansion, its rays filtering through the towering windows that overlooked the manicured gardens of Beverly Hills. Elena Martinez adjusted her cleaning supplies cart and took a deep breath, steeling herself for another day in the opulent prison that had become her workplace for the past 3 years. At 52, Elena carried herself with quiet dignity despite the weight of her circumstances. Her calloused hands spoke of decades of hard work, first in the factories of East Los Angeles, where she'd raised her daughter as a single mother, and now in the pristine halls of wealth that felt like another world entirely. Her dark hair, streaked with premature gray, was always pulled back in a neat bun, and her uniform was impeccably pressed, a small act of pride in a job that often made her feel invisible. The mansion belonged to Richard Blackwood, a tech mogul whose fortune had been built on government contracts and military technology. At 65, he commanded respect through fear rather than admiration, his steel-gray eyes and permanently furrowed brow making even his own family tread carefully around him. This Tuesday morning found him pacing in his study, phone pressed to his ear, his voice sharp with irritation. "Senator Martinez, I don't care what your conscience is telling you." Richard's voice carried through the slightly open door as Elena dusted the hallway outside. "The defense contract goes through as planned, or I'll make sure your little tax evasion scandal from 2018 becomes front-page news." Elena froze, her feather duster suspended in midair. "Senator Martinez." That was her cousin Miguel's surname, though she hadn't seen him in years since he'd entered politics. She shook her head, telling herself it was probably a coincidence. There were many Martinez families in California. "Good," Richard continued, his tone softening with satisfaction. "I knew you'd see reason. The weapons shipment to Yemen will proceed next month. Just remember, Senator, everyone has secrets. Some are just more expensive to keep buried than others." The line went dead, and Elena quickly resumed her dusting, her heart pounding. She'd heard whispers among the other staff about Mr. Blackwood's business dealings, but this was the first time she'd overheard something so explicitly troubling. Weapons to Yemen. Wasn't there a humanitarian crisis there? She thought of her daughter Sophia, now 25, and working as a nurse in a public hospital, always talking about helping people in war-torn countries. Richard emerged from his study, nearly colliding with Elena. For a moment, his mask slipped, and she saw something she'd never seen before. Genuine concern, perhaps even fear, but it lasted only a second before his usual cold demeanor returned. "Mrs. Martinez," he said curtly, using the formal address he'd insisted upon, despite her repeated corrections that she preferred Ms. "I trust you're finding everything in order?" "Yes, sir," Elena replied, keeping her eyes downcast as she'd learned to do. Just finishing the hallway. He studied her for a moment longer than usual, his gaze calculating. "Good. Remember, discretion is part of your job description. The things that happen in this house stay in this house." It wasn't the first time he'd made such a comment, but today it felt different. Heavier, more threatening. Elena nodded silently and watched as he strode toward the front entrance, where his driver waited to take him to his downtown office. As the black Mercedes disappeared down the winding driveway, Elena found herself alone with her thoughts and the weight of what she'd overheard. She continued her morning routine, but her mind wandered to her daughter's stories about the patients she treated, refugees from conflicts around the world, children who'd lost everything to violence and greed. The mansion felt different that day, its luxury seeming more obscene somehow. The golden fixtures and priceless artwork that had once impressed her now felt like monuments to blood money. Elena had always prided herself on maintaining her integrity, despite her circumstances, but she was beginning to realize that silence might be its own form of compromise. In the kitchen, she found Maria Santos, the head cook, preparing lunch. Maria had worked for the Blackwood family for nearly a decade and had become Elena's closest confidant in the house. At 48, Maria possessed a wisdom born from experience, and a warmth that made the cold mansion feel slightly more human. "You look troubled today, mija," Maria observed, noting the tension in Elena's shoulders. "Everything all right?" Elena hesitated, glancing around to ensure they were alone. "Maria, what do you know about Mr. Blackwood's business? I mean, really know?" Maria's expression grew serious. She set down her knife and wiped her hands on her apron. "Odd, why do you ask?" "I overheard something today, something that doesn't sit right with me." "Elena," Maria said softly, moving closer. "I've been here a long time. I've seen things, heard things. Mr. Blackwood isn't just wealthy. He's connected to people and situations that, well, let's just say the money doesn't always come from clean sources." The confirmation of her suspicions sent a chill down Elena's spine. "Have you ever thought about saying something? To someone who could do something about it?" Maria's face paled. "Are you crazy? Do you know what happened to the last person who asked too many questions? James The previous groundskeeper? He started getting curious about the frequent late-night deliveries, the meetings with men in expensive suits who didn't seem like typical business associates. One day, he just didn't show up for work. Mr. Blackwood said he'd found better employment elsewhere, but James left all his tools, his final paycheck unclaimed. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. You think? I think, Maria said firmly, that some secrets are kept secret for very dangerous reasons. Whatever you heard today, Elena, forget it. For your own safety, and for Sophia's. But as Elena returned to her duties, she found that forgetting was impossible. The conversation replayed in her mind, each word becoming clearer and more disturbing. Senator Martinez, she had to find out if it was really her cousin Miguel, and if it was, what did that mean for her family, for her community, for all the people who trusted him to represent their interests? That evening, as she rode the bus back to her small apartment in East LA, Elena stared out the window at the city lights. Somewhere out there, weapons were being prepared for shipment to a country torn apart by civil war. Somewhere, her cousin might be complicit in deals that would cost innocent lives. And somewhere, a powerful man believed his secrets were safe because the people who cleaned his house, cooked his food, and tended his gardens were invisible to him. For the first time in 3 years, Elena began to wonder if being invisible might actually be her greatest advantage. Chapter 2. Pieces of truth. Elena's sleep was restless that night, filled with dreams of faceless children and the sound of her daughter's voice talking about the young patients she'd lost. She woke before dawn, her mind already churning with questions and doubts. Over her morning coffee, a luxury she allowed herself despite her tight budget, she made a decision that would change everything. Using her old laptop, a gift from Sophia years ago, Elena began researching. Senator Miguel Martinez of California. There he was, her second cousin, the boy she remembered from family gatherings decades ago, who had always talked about making a difference in the world. The irony wasn't lost on her that while she cleaned houses to survive, he lived in Washington making laws. The news articles painted him as a champion of human rights and military accountability. Just 6 months ago, he'd given a passionate speech about the need to restrict arms sales to countries with poor human rights records. Yet, if what she'd overheard was true, he was about to vote in favor of exactly the kind of deal he publicly opposed. Elena's research was interrupted by a text from Sophia. Mom, can we have lunch today? I need to talk to you about something important. They met at their usual spot, a small Mexican restaurant near the hospital where Sophia worked. Elena's daughter had inherited her mother's strong features, but carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd never had to make herself invisible. At 25, Sophia was everything Elena had dreamed she could become: educated, principled, and determined to make the world better. Mom, you look tired, Sophia observed as they settled into their booth. Is everything okay at work? Elena hesitated, then decided on partial honesty. I've been thinking about family lately. Do you remember Cousin Miguel, the senator? Of course. You always said he was one of the good ones who made it out of the neighborhood. Why? I heard his name mentioned at work yesterday. It made me wonder if success always comes at a price. Sophia's expression grew thoughtful. You know, that's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. There's been talk at the hospital about a potential influx of refugees from Yemen. The situation there is deteriorating, and some of the aid organizations I work with are saying it's because of increased weapons flowing into the conflict. Elena's blood chilled. Weapons. American weapons. Sold through defense contractors to various parties in the conflict. It's heartbreaking. Mom, these kids come to us missing limbs, traumatized, and for what? So some rich men can get richer selling instruments of death. The weight of what Elena knew pressed down on her like a physical force. Her daughter was treating the victims of the very crimes she was keeping silent about. Mom, what would you do? Elena asked carefully. If you knew who was responsible for some of those weapons deals. I'd expose them, Sophia said without hesitation. I'd make sure the world knew what they were doing. These aren't just business transactions. Mom, they're death sentences for innocent people. That afternoon, Elena returned to the Blackwood mansion with new purpose. She began paying closer attention to Richard's phone calls, his meetings, the documents that occasionally lay scattered on his desk. She started arriving earlier and staying later, volunteering for extra duties that would give her access to different parts of the house. It was during one of these extended shifts that she discovered Richard's private office, a room she'd never been asked to clean, accessed through a hidden door behind a bookshelf in his study. Elena found it purely by accident while dusting, when she bumped against one of the books and heard a soft click. The office was smaller than his main study, but far more revealing. The walls were covered with maps of conflict zones, photographs of military equipment, and what appeared to be shipping manifests. A large safe sat in one corner, and filing cabinets lined another wall. Elena's cleaning skills had taught her to be observant, to notice what was out of place, and everything in this room screamed of clandestine activity. She was about to leave, when she noticed a document partially visible beneath a stack of folders on the desk. The letterhead read, Blackwood Defense Solutions, and the subject line made her heart race. Operation Desert Shield, Yemen Arms Transfer Authorization. Elena's hands trembled as she pulled out her phone and took a quick photo, then carefully repositioned the document exactly as she'd found it. She'd crossed a line now, moved from unwilling observer to active investigator. The thought terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. Over the following days, Elena began building a careful routine. She would arrive at the mansion early, complete her regular duties, then spend time in the hidden office whenever Richard was away. She photographed documents, shipping records, and correspondence that painted a clear picture of illegal arms deals involving multiple countries, all orchestrated through a network of shell companies and corrupt politicians. The most damning evidence came in the form of recorded conversations. Richard kept detailed audio files of his phone calls, probably as insurance against his co-conspirators. Elena listened to hours of discussions about bribes, threats, and the systematic circumvention of international law. Senator Martinez featured prominently in many of these recordings, his voice growing increasingly strained as Richard's demands escalated. One recording, dated just a week ago, was particularly chilling. Senator, I need the Yemen vote locked down by Friday. Richard's voice was cold and businesslike. The shipment is already in transit. Richard, you don't understand the position you're putting me in. Miguel's voice was barely recognizable, heavy with stress and fear. The media is already asking questions about my voting record. If this comes out, then make sure it doesn't come out. You have more to lose than just your political career, Miguel. Remember what happened to Congressman Torres when he grew a conscience? Elena had researched Congressman Torres. He died in a car accident 2 years ago, just days after announcing his intention to investigate defense contractor corruption. The official report cited brake failure, but Elena was beginning to understand that in Richard Blackwood's world, there were no coincidences. As she sat in her small apartment that evening, reviewing the evidence she'd gathered, Elena realized she was in possession of information that could bring down one of the most powerful men in America. But she also understood that knowledge made her incredibly dangerous to him. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. Mom, I love you. Thanks for always teaching me to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. Elena stared at the message for a long time, then began making plans. If something happened to her, she needed to ensure the evidence would still come to light. But more than that, she needed to find someone she could trust, someone with the power and platform to ensure the truth couldn't be buried along with her. Tomorrow, she would take the most dangerous step yet. She would make contact with someone who could help her expose Richard Blackwood's empire of corruption. Elena Martinez, the invisible Maid, was about to become the most visible threat to a very powerful man. Chapter 3. The Weight of Truth. Elena spent the sleepless night making copies of everything. Photos printed at a 24-hour copy shop, audio files transferred to multiple flash drives, documents organized and cross-referenced. She worked methodically, her nurse's daughter having taught her the importance of systematic record-keeping. By dawn, she had assembled the most comprehensive evidence of corruption and illegal arms dealing that had ever been compiled against a sitting defense contractor. The question that haunted her as she prepared for what might be her last day at the Blackwood mansion was simple. Who could she trust? The local police seemed laughably inadequate for something of this magnitude. The FBI might be compromised. Richard's influence clearly extended deep into government circles. She needed someone with both credibility and independence, someone who couldn't be bought or intimidated. The answer came to her as she rode the bus to work. Sarah Chen, the investigative journalist who'd won a Pulitzer Prize for exposing Pentagon corruption 3 years ago. Elena had read her articles religiously, admiring the woman's courage and thoroughness. If anyone could handle this story, it would be Sarah Chen. At the mansion, Elena went through her morning routine with careful normalcy, but she was hyper-aware of every sound, every movement. Richard seemed more agitated than usual, pacing his study and making hushed phone calls. Around 10 a.m., she overheard fragments of a conversation that made her blood run cold. Yes, I'm aware there might be a security issue, Richard was saying. Someone's been in the private office. Things have been moved, however slightly. I want a full background check on all staff members, and I want it today. Elena's hands shook as she dusted the hallway furniture. He knew, somehow, despite her careful attention to detail, Richard had detected her presence in his secret office. She had hours, maybe less, before his investigation led back to her. In the kitchen, Maria immediately noticed her distress. Elena, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Maria, I need you to listen carefully, Elena whispered, glancing around to ensure they were alone. If anything happens to me, I need you to call this number. She slipped a piece of paper into Maria's hand. Tell them Elena Martinez has a package for Sarah Chen. Tell them it's about Blackwood Defense Solutions. Elena, You're scaring me. What package? What's going on? I can't explain everything, but I found evidence of something terrible. Richard Blackwood is selling weapons to countries that are using them to kill innocent people, including children. He's bribing politicians and threatening anyone who tries to stop him. Maria's face went pale. Dios mío, Elena. You need to get out of here, now. I can't run, Maria. If I disappear, he wins. These crimes continue, and more people die. Elena grasped her friend's hands. But I need to know someone will make sure the truth comes out if something happens to me. Before Maria could respond, they heard footsteps in the corridor. Elena quickly busied herself with preparing cleaning supplies, while Maria returned to her lunch preparations. Richard entered the kitchen, his usual cold demeanor replaced by something far more menacing. "Ladies," he said, his voice deceptively casual, "I'll be having some security consultants visit the house this afternoon. They'll be interviewing all staff members about recent activities, just routine security protocols. I trust you'll both be cooperative." The threat in his tone was unmistakable. Elena nodded silently, not trusting her voice, while Maria managed a nervous, "Of course, Mr. Blackwood." After he left, Elena made her decision. She couldn't wait for afternoon interviews, or hope that Richard's investigators wouldn't uncover her activities. She had to act now, while she still could. "Maria, I have to go," she whispered urgently. "Remember what I told you." Elena slipped out through the service entrance and walked quickly to her car, an old Honda Civic that had seen better days. Her hands trembled as she started the engine, half expecting security guards to surround her at any moment. But the mansion remained quiet behind her. As she drove down the winding driveway for what she knew would be the last time, she drove to a coffee shop in downtown LA and used their Wi-Fi to send an encrypted email to Sarah Chen's professional address. The message was brief. "I have evidence of illegal arms deals involving Blackwood Defense Solutions, Senator Miguel Martinez, and weapons sales to Yemen. This is not a hoax. Lives depend on this information reaching the public. I will call you at 3 p.m. today." At exactly 3 p.m., Elena dialed the number listed on Sarah Chen's website. To her relief, the journalist answered personally. "This is Sarah Chen. Ms. Chen, my name is Elena Martinez. I sent you an email this morning about Blackwood Defense Solutions." There was a pause. "I received your message. Ms. Martinez, I get a lot of tips, many of them from people with good intentions but little evidence. What makes you think you have something I should investigate?" "Because I have Richard Blackwood's own recorded conversations admitting to bribing Senator Martinez and others to approve illegal weapon sales. I have shipping manifests showing weapons being sent to Yemen through shell companies. I have photographs of documents detailing payoffs and threats." Elena's voice grew stronger with each word. "And I have audio of him discussing what happened to Congressman Torres." The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly 30 seconds. When Sarah spoke again, her tone was entirely different. Sharp, focused, professional. "Where are you right now, Ms. Martinez?" "A coffee shop in downtown LA. Ms. Chen, I need you to understand something. Richard Blackwood knows someone has been gathering evidence against him. I don't think I have much time." "Listen to me very carefully," Sarah said. "Don't go home. Don't go anywhere predictable. I'm catching the next flight to LA. Can you meet me at the Federal Building downtown at 8 p.m? "The Federal Building? I have contacts there, people I trust. We need to get you and your evidence into protective custody while we verify what you have." Elena felt a surge of hope, mixed with terror. "Ms. Chen, there's something else you should know. Senator Martinez is my cousin. I've seen what this corruption has done to him, how it's destroying him. But more than that, I've seen what these weapons are doing to innocent people through my daughter's work. She's a nurse treating refugees from these conflicts. Your cousin is Senator Martinez." Sarah's voice sharpened with interest. That could be very significant for corroborating the evidence." After ending the call, Elena sat in her car outside the coffee shop, watching the afternoon traffic flow through downtown LA. She thought about her life, the years of struggle, of making herself invisible to survive, of accepting that people like her didn't matter to people like Richard Blackwood. But today, she mattered. Today, her voice could speak for all the voiceless victims of greed and corruption. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. "Mom, I heard on the news that there might be some big defense contract scandal breaking. Made me think of our conversation yesterday. Love you." Elena smiled despite her fear. Her daughter would be proud of what she was doing. She typed back, "Love you too, Mija. Whatever happens, remember that doing the right thing is always worth the cost." As evening approached, Elena began driving toward the Federal Building, unaware that a black SUV had been following her since she left the coffee shop. Richard Blackwood's security consultants had been more efficient than she'd hoped, and now the race was on between justice and the forces that would do anything to keep their secrets buried. The maid who had spent 3 years invisible was about to step into the brightest spotlight of her life, holding in her hands the evidence that could topple an empire built on blood money and corruption. Chapter 4. The Breaking Point. The federal building loomed against the darkening Los Angeles sky as Elena parked across the street, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. She clutched her bag containing the flash drives, printed documents, and backup copies of everything she'd discovered. In her other hand, her phone showed 6 missed calls from an unknown number and a text message from Maria. "Elena, where are you?" Men came to the house asking questions. "Mr. Blackwood is furious." Elena checked her watch. 7:45 p.m. Sarah Chen would be here soon, along with whatever federal agents she trusted to handle such explosive evidence. Elena stepped out of her car and immediately noticed the black SUV parked half a block away, its occupants clearly watching her. Her blood chilled as she recognized the driver, one of Richard's regular security personnel. They'd found her. Elena's instinct was to run, but she forced herself to think strategically. If she fled now, she might evade capture temporarily, but Richard would have time to destroy evidence and eliminate witnesses. Maria could be in danger, Miguel could be silenced permanently, and the weapons shipments to Yemen would continue. She had one chance to get the evidence to Sarah Chen and the authorities. Taking a deep breath, Elena walked toward the federal building's entrance, acutely aware of the SUV's engine starting behind her. She'd made it halfway across the street when her phone rang. Sarah Chen. "Ms. Martinez, I'm in the building lobby." "Where are you?" "Coming up to the entrance," Elena replied, glancing back to see 2 men in dark suits getting out of the SUV. "But I think Richard's people have found me. Get inside now. I have federal marshals with me." Elena quickened her pace, but the men behind her were faster. Just as she reached the building steps, a firm hand grasped her shoulder. "Miss Martinez, Mr. Blackwood would like to speak with you," the man said, his voice politely menacing. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of bland face that disappeared in crowds. Perfect for private security work. "I'm sorry, but I have an appointment," Elena replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm afraid that appointment will have to wait." The second man had moved to her other side, effectively boxing her in. "Mr. Blackwood is waiting in the car. It would be best if you came willingly." Elena looked up at the federal building's entrance, so close yet impossibly far. Through the glass doors, she could see a woman in a sharp business suit, undoubtedly Sarah Chen, flanked by 2 men in federal agent attire. They were watching the scene unfold, but Elena realized they couldn't act without risking her safety. "What does Mr. Blackwood want to discuss?" Elena asked, stalling for time. "Your recent curiosity about his business affairs," the first man replied. "He's prepared to be generous in exchange for your discretion." Elena almost laughed at the absurdity. After everything she'd discovered, the bribes, the weapon sales, the deaths of innocent people, Richard thought he could buy her silence with money. But then she remembered Maria's warning about James, the groundskeeper who'd asked too many questions. "And if I'm not interested in his generosity?" The men exchanged glances. "Mr. Blackwood hopes it won't come to that. He's particularly concerned about your daughter Sophia's well-being. Nurses work such dangerous jobs, dealing with unstable patients and all." The threat to Sophia crystallized Elena's resolve. She'd lived her whole life being pushed around by powerful people who thought they could control her through fear. Not today. "Tell Mr. Blackwood," Elena said loudly, ensuring her voice carried to the federal building entrance, "that Elena Martinez is done being invisible, and tell him the whole world is about to know what kind of monster he really is." Before the men could react, Elena broke free and ran toward the building entrance, shouting at the top of her lungs, "Sarah Chen, I have the evidence. Blackwood Defense Solutions. Yemen weapons deals." The federal building's doors burst open as the marshals rushed out, their weapons drawn. The 2 security men immediately backed away, hands visible, clearly not prepared for a confrontation with federal agents. "I'm Elena Martinez," she gasped as Sarah Chen reached her. "I have everything. Recordings, documents, shipping manifests. Richard Blackwood is selling weapons illegally and bribing senators to approve the deals." Sarah Chen was exactly as Elena had imagined, sharp-eyed, competent, radiating the confidence of someone who'd taken on powerful people before and won. "Are you hurt? Do you need medical attention?" "I'm fine, but we need to move fast. Richard knows I have the evidence, and he's already threatening my daughter." One of the federal marshals, a stern-faced woman in her 40s, stepped forward. "I'm Deputy Marshal Rebecca Torres. We're going to get you somewhere safe while we review your evidence." "Torres?" Elena's eyes widened. "Are you related to Congressman Torres?" The marshal's expression hardened. "He was my brother, and if you have evidence about what really happened to him, then Richard Blackwood is about to face justice for more than just arms dealing." As they hustled Elena into the federal building, She glimpsed the black SUV pulling away, but she also noticed other vehicles, news vans with satellite dishes, reporters with cameras. Sarah Chen had clearly been busy in the hours since their phone conversation. In a secure conference room, Elena spread out her evidence while Sarah Chen recorded everything and the federal marshals took detailed notes. The recordings were the most damning. Richard's own voice describing bribes, discussing the elimination of threats, and casually planning the sale of weapons that would kill thousands of innocent people. When they played the recording about Congressman Torres, Deputy Marshal Torres had to leave the room for several minutes. When she returned, her eyes were red, but her jaw was set with determination. "Mrs. Martinez," she said formally, "on behalf of the United States Marshals Service, I want to thank you for your courage in bringing this forward. Your evidence will help us not only stop ongoing crimes, but also bring justice for past ones." Sarah Chen looked up from her notes. "Elena, I need you to understand what's about to happen. When this story breaks, and it will break in tomorrow morning's edition, your life will change completely. You'll be a key witness in what could be the biggest corruption scandal in decades. Are you prepared for that?" Elena thought of her daughter, of the refugee children Sophia treated, of her cousin Miguel trapped in Richard's web of corruption, of James the groundskeeper and Congressman Torres, and all the other victims of Richard Blackwood's greed. "Ms. Chen," she said quietly, "I've been invisible my whole life. People like Richard Blackwood count on people like me staying invisible, staying quiet, staying afraid. But I have a daughter who believes in justice, and I can't look her in the eye knowing I stayed silent while children died from the weapons her employers sold." Elena pulled out her phone and called Sophia. When her daughter answered, Elena could hear the worry in her voice. "Mom, where are you?" "I've been trying to call you all day. Sophia, I need you to listen carefully. I'm with federal agents and a journalist. Tomorrow morning, you're going to see news stories about Richard Blackwood and the people I work for. I want you to know that your mother helped expose crimes that were hurting the kind of people you care about." There was silence on the other end, then Sophia's voice, thick with emotion. "Mom, are you in danger? I'm as safe as I can be, mija. But I need you to be proud of me, because I'm finally doing something that matters. I've always been proud of you, Mom. Always." As Elena ended the call, she looked around the room at the federal agents, the evidence spread across the table, and Sarah Chen preparing to write the story that would change everything. For the first time in her life, Elena Martinez was exactly where she was supposed to be, at the center of a fight for justice, holding the evidence that would bring down a corrupt empire. Tomorrow, the Maid would hold up the paper and expose the secret the millionaire tried to bury, but tonight, she was simply a woman who'd found her voice and chosen to use it for something bigger than herself. Chapter 5. Truth Unveiled. The morning sun painted Los Angeles in golden hues as Elena sat in the safe house, watching Sarah Chen's exposé dominate every news channel. The headline blazed across screens nationwide. "Weapons of corruption. Defense contractors' secret deals exposed by brave whistleblower." Elena's phone hadn't stopped ringing. Reporters, federal agents, and concerned citizens all wanted to speak with the Maid who had brought down one of America's most powerful men, but she only cared about one call. The one from Sophia, who had rushed to the safe house as soon as the marshals cleared her visit. "Mom," Sophia said, embracing her tightly, "I can't believe you did this. Do you understand how many lives you've saved?" Through the window, Elena could see news vans lining the street, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like mechanical flowers. The invisible woman had become the most visible person in America overnight. Deputy Marshal Torres entered the room with updates. Richard Blackwood was arrested at his mansion 2 hours ago. The FBI is executing search warrants at Blackwood Defense Solutions and 12 other locations. Senator Martinez turned himself in this morning. His attorney says he's prepared to testify against Blackwood in exchange for leniency. Elena felt a complex mix of emotions about her cousin. How is Miguel? "Honestly, relieved," Torres replied. "According to his statement, he's been living in terror for 2 years, caught between his conscience and Blackwood's threats. Your evidence gave him the courage to break free." Sarah Chen joined them, laptop in hand, showing Elena the global response to her story. "The weapons shipment to Yemen has been intercepted by international authorities. The UN Security Council is calling an emergency session. 3 other senators have come forward admitting to similar coercion by Blackwood." "What about Maria and the other staff at the house?" Elena asked, remembering her friend's worried face. "All safe," Torres assured her. In fact, Maria provided additional testimony about suspicious activities she'd witnessed over the years. "She says to tell you that you did what James would have wanted." Elena wiped away tears she hadn't realized were falling. "What happens now?" "Now," Sarah said, "you help us make sure this kind of corruption can never happen again. The evidence you gathered has opened investigations into dozens of other defense contractors. Congress is already drafting new oversight legislation." Sophia squeezed her mother's hand. "And now you become the person you've always been inside, someone who stands up for what's right. right. Elena looked at her daughter, thinking of all the refugee children Sophia had treated, of the Yemeni families who would now be spared American weapons, of all the future victims who would be protected because one invisible woman had chosen to become visible. "But there's something I need to do," Elena said suddenly. An hour later, Elena stood before a massive crowd of reporters outside the federal building. She'd changed from her maid's uniform into a simple but dignified dress Sophia had brought her. Her hair was down for the first time in years, and she carried herself with quiet authority. "My name is Elena Martinez," she began, her voice carrying clearly in the morning air. "For 3 years, I cleaned the house of a man who sold weapons to countries where those weapons killed innocent people. I was invisible to him, just another servant he could ignore." The crowd was completely silent. Cameras focused on this ordinary woman who had done an extraordinary thing. "But being invisible taught me to see things others missed. I saw the evidence of corruption, the proof of crimes, the truth that powerful men thought they could bury. I'm standing here today because I believe that no one, no matter how wealthy or connected, is above the law." Elena paused, thinking of her daughter, of Maria, of all the people who had shown her courage, to other people who clean houses, who serve food, who work in the shadows of powerful people. "You are not invisible. You see things, you know things, and your voice matters. If you witness wrongdoing, speak up. Find someone you trust. Gather your evidence, and remember that the truth is more powerful than any amount of money or influence." She held up a copy of Sarah Chen's newspaper, the headline visible to all the cameras. "This paper contains the secret a millionaire tried to bury, but secrets have a way of coming to light when ordinary people choose to do extraordinary things." The crowd erupted in applause as Elena stepped back from the microphones. Sophia was there immediately, wrapping her mother in a fierce hug. "I'm so proud of you, Mom," Elena smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. "I'm proud of us, Mija, all of us who choose to fight for what's right." 6 months later, Richard Blackwood was sentenced to 30 years in federal prison. Senator Martinez received a reduced sentence of 5 years after his cooperation helped convict 12 other corrupt officials. The weapons dealing network was completely dismantled, and new legislation required unprecedented transparency in defense contracts. Elena never returned to domestic work. Instead, she became a whistleblower advocate, working with a foundation that protected people who exposed corporate corruption. Her first case involved another housekeeper who had discovered environmental crimes at a chemical company. Maria left the Blackwood mansion and joined Elena's foundation as a coordinator, helping other service workers understand their rights and protection options. "We see everything," Maria would tell new clients. "Now it's time the world sees what we see." On a warm spring evening, Elena sat in her new apartment, modest but comfortable, paid for by the whistleblower reward she'd received. Sophia visited regularly, bringing stories from the hospital about how the reduced conflict in Yemen had led to fewer refugee patients and more success stories. Elena's phone rang. It was another potential whistleblower, a janitor at a pharmaceutical company who'd noticed suspicious activities. As Elena listened to his story, she remembered the fear she'd felt just months ago, the weight of carrying dangerous secrets alone. "You're not invisible," she told him, echoing the words that had become her motto. "Your voice matters, and we're going to make sure the world hears it." Outside her window, the city lights of Los Angeles sparkled like stars. Elena Martinez, the maid who had held up the paper and exposed the secret a millionaire tried to bury, was no longer invisible. She had become a beacon of hope for every ordinary person who possessed the extraordinary courage to speak truth to power. The mansion in Beverly Hills sat empty now, its golden fixtures and marble floors cold and silent. But in apartments and small houses across the city, people like Elena were wide awake, watching, listening, and ready to ensure that no secret, no matter how powerful its keeper, would stay buried forever. Justice, Elena had learned, wasn't just about courtrooms and sentences. It was about the moment when invisible people chose to step into the light, holding evidence of truth in their hands and courage in their hearts. And in that moment, they discovered they had never been invisible at all. They had simply been waiting for their time to shine. Thank you for joining us for this powerful story of courage and justice. If Elena's story moved you, please subscribe to our channel and share this video with others who believe in the power of standing up for what's right. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Your support helps us continue bringing you stories that matter. Until next time, remember, you are never as powerless as you think, and your voice can change the world.